Hello good people, my name is Mats Ljunggren and I will be your instructor for Boozang test automation today. In this course, we will teach you how to become an automation developer, go through all the basics using the tool Boozang. In order to get started, you need to sign up at boozang.com. So basically right now, go to https://boozang.com and sign up with your email address. The layout of this course will be a mix of me talking like this and also doing screen captures on the screen behind me here. And we will try and keep the courses brief, about 5 minutes each, because we don't want to bore you too much. Speaking of boring, testing of software is usually kind of boring, clicking through user interfaces. You'll see and notice that test automation is the opposite. It's almost like training your robot to do your dirty work for you. Usually, in order to learn test automation, it takes several months and requires programming skills, for instance, using tools like Selenium. If you're doing manual testing for work right now, after this course, you should be able to save a lot of time. We are confident that after this course, using the Boozang tool, you should be able to take long lunch breaks, get home by 4 p.m. and sleep in the next day. So let's get started. In order to get started, go to app.boozang.com. Make sure you sign up for a free account and then go ahead and create a new project. So the project we're going to call Udemy. And don't care about these other fields for now, just go ahead and submit this one. And now we've created a project in our cloud which allows us to get started. And then the easy way to just get started, go to our tutorial sites, tutorial.boozang.com, and choose the shop link. And here you'll see our example site, the shop, where we would do all the exercises on being launched. So the best way to follow along is basically to install the Boozang plugin and just click here and launch the Udemy project right there. So now that's basically everything. Now you're ready to start following this course, creating tests, and probably learning to do quite a bit of test automation in just a couple of hours here. As you can see, when you launch the Boozang tool, you get a little toolbar like this that gives you access to all the functions. And then you also have this weird looking browser window here. This is actually the master window that controls and allows you to save on our server and do all the exposing all the functions here. I'm first gonna just go over the functions in the toolbar. Very simple. This one expands and opens up the project navigation, and here you can see your project module that are like folders and the individual tests. The recording allows you to record, basically capture the actions that you do in the browser. You also have a playback button that basically playbacks the test, and as you can see here, you have a number of different play modes. We're going to go into those later. Here you have the validation functionality that allows us to quickly do assertion conditions in the browser. You also have the comment functionality, and the comment is basically to highlight visual bugs or to provide instructions. It could also be called annotation. We also have the form fill data, and this one actually allows you to fill complex forms and bind them directly into data. The revert function reloads the test from your server and loses all your local changes, and the save function saves all the data to the server. When you actually do an update, it's automatically saved in your browser local storage, but it's not until you press save it gets pushed to the server. And then we also have this little bar with more advanced functionality that we will talk more about later. One thing that could be worth mentioning is, in order to create the modules and test, you have a quick button here, the little plus,
that allows you to do that quickly from the menu bar. There is also the more advanced functionality of the tool, and the way to show the complete tool, you basically just click on this browser window and it expands the full tool. And if you click on the logo again, you're back. So in the beginning of this lectures, we will only use the little toolbar because it allows us to do a lot of things. But in order to drive very complex logic, we sometimes need to go into the big tool here. Just to give you a little overview, it's the same kind of idea. On the left-hand side, you have the project tree. So if I go to the root, you have the modules at the first level and then the tests underneath. And then you can also choose to highlight the modules or the test at any level. This would be useful, for instance, when you have hundreds of test cases. You can also navigate directly in the tree, just like a browser, or use back and forward to toggle between where you were before. Very quickly, here you have the settings. This allows you to you have access to a lot of video tutorials and documentation and your own account. But more importantly, the settings, which I will go into more later. The top buttons here allows you to save all tests or to revert all tests. Basically, reverting all tests loads all data from the server, getting rid of all your local changes, and saving all the tests pushes all your local changes to the server. This is very important, called logs. It also contains the reporting view. So when you execute a test, this is where you will see the report being generated. You can also save a report, and you can also see what different people in your team are doing. This is all WebSockets, so it's all real-time data, which is very useful when you run big teams. Last and not least, we understand that we have a lot of functionality. So for any help, just click on this question mark and you see how the buttons get highlighted. You can basically get an explanation on any of the functions. Very quickly, I will also do a quick overview of the settings, just so you know what's there. This is not anything we would need to adjust for the tutorial. It's just good to know that it's there. So let me go into settings. On the general settings tab, you have a lot of different options. One thing is the different default weights and intervals in milliseconds. And this could be very, very useful when you, for instance, want to slow down tests or you have a non-responsive site. Just know that it's here. No need to edit it in the tutorial, for sure. The DOM strategy, when you start manipulating and doing tests on your own site, it's very good to go in here and do a one-time configuration to get the best possible stable recording. After successful configuration here, even if the default configuration works well, we can handle any site to do extremely stable recordings with the Boozang tool. The recording events, letting us know what to record, which events to record. No need to touch this, but it could be good to make sure, for instance, if you're recording drag and drop, that the checkbox is checked. Validation ignore, the default validation condition that we use can here be set different ways. Content policy is our first move towards using artificial intelligence to do the testing, so it's good to know that it's here, but I'm not going to go into it. And also a way to subscribe to test reports from the project. But that's it. Now let's get started with the fun testing.
So why do test automation and why learn it? Well, in new projects, right, in software development, we have a lot of projects transitioning into agile and even more so in continuous integration, where we have to push new features very rapidly, sometimes as often as many times a day. As an example, let's say we have an e-commerce website and we just updated the discount system. The developers will tell you that everything is fine, they tested the discount system. But as we know in software development, if you have experience from that process, when you touch one system, everything is intertwined and anything could break. So ideally, we would need to test through the whole e-commerce website to make sure nothing broke. Now, of course, we could have a room full of developers sitting, clicking through user interfaces, adding stuff to the cart, making sure that a purchase goes through. But of course, this is really boring work. It's costly, time-consuming, and not very practical, even though it's been known to happen this way in many companies. Wouldn't it be better, though, if we could have a piece of software that would just test the software for you to make sure it works and let you know if it works or not without human interaction? Well, that's where test automation comes in, and in our example, Boozang. In our example, we will take an e-commerce application and do some simple tests, and in an afternoon, we're going to go to some advanced logic, and you're going to learn to basically automate all these flows to create this situation where you don't need a human testing for you. And in our example, we are using an e-commerce application, but of course, Boozang would work for any software that runs in the browser.
We are going to start by creating some simple navigation tests using the record functionality. But before we get started, it's better that we keep our test cases in order. So I'm going to start by pressing this plus and creating a new module that will be a collection for our test cases. What you see now here, every time you do something that creates a module or a test, is that the full tool will expand. So I'm going to call this module navigation. And as soon as I submit it, it goes back into the minimized form. But every time you want to go and get the big tool again, you just have to click on the logo like this. And I'm going to create my first test, which is the top level navigation. And I'm going to actually, let's call it top level navigation. And now I'm going to start to record, and I'm basically just going to click the top links here. So clicking the sign up, the login, the contact, and the documentation. So basically I recorded that, I can stop that, and now I can play that back, that exact action. And one good test, so now you've already created your first test that isn't of course testing something very significant, it's just basically clicking the links in the top bar. One thing that could be good to know, you see this goes fairly quickly. You can also choose to play in demo mode, and it will actually slow it down and highlight the actions. So it's very good when you want to, when you take over someone else's test case, or you just basically forgot what you did and want to kind of audit it. And here you can see it playing back much slower and also telling you all the actions it's doing. Very good. Of course, this was a very simple navigation test, but this is the basis for a lot of the tests we will be doing using the record and also going on using the validation functionality right here. As we saw before, we could easily create a simple recording for the top level navigation. One thing before we start creating something more sophisticated, remember this is only saved locally in your local storage, so you want to go ahead and save this test case to the server, and as you see it's no longer dirty. You can now see that it's basically saved to the server. I'm also going to go back to the regular play mode again. And I'm going to create a new test. So just press on the plus, and now I'm going to create validate items. Okay, so I'm actually going to use and do some recording on the shop functionality. So I go back to the home page, I start recording, and I basically click on these items here. Of course I can navigate this now, but let's say I want to create an insertion on the title. basically making sure that the title is what it says here. So I can basically just click here and just highlight that part, and I automatically validate it. So now if I go back and play this back, it's basically going to do the click and do the assert equals condition. And as you can see, there is a green thing here highlighting saying, hey, this was successful, this worked. If I want to see the same thing in the main tool, click here and click on logs, and then under test report you can see the executed test that executed successfully, where the view link would basically take us back to that test. So that's a successful assertion. So we just completed a successful assertion condition very fast. Well, because my site is stable and not failing, we could actually fake to get a failed assertion. I just want to show you how that would look. So in order to do that, it's better to go into the detail view. So basically click here and make sure you're highlighting the test validate items, and then go and double click on the assertion. Now you get access to the detailed assertion view where you can do very, very sophisticated things. Go in here and just basically change one of the words for the assert equals here. If I do this, I can easily, and let's save it upstream on the server as well in case we forget it. Now if I play it, it's basically going to do the same thing, but it should basically fail the assertion because I've changed the text. As you can see now, it's a little X here that shows you that there is a problem. And if I go into the report, I can see the test report saying validate on failed. And what it says is the actual result does not match the expected result, which is exactly what we would expect. But also notice here when I click diff, we can get the exact difference of the assertion, and we can also override. Let's say this is a desirable update, we can actually update the test case directly here with override, which would allow it to succeed the next time around. So that's a very simple way to see what happens when we catch a problem in the Boozang tool. As I showed before, when you have a failed assertion and it's a desirable failure, basically, oh, my test is wrong, it's very simple to update the test right here by using the override function. But there's also other ways. Let me show you two ways. One thing is basically the play mode debug. Debug mode basically allows you, if I highlight a test here, it would allow me to play, and if there is a problem, it's going to intercept it and highlight it and allow me to change it on the fly and then continue. And this is a very, very powerful functionality that doesn't exist in other IDEs like Eclipse, etc., where you have to add breakpoints. Here you can basically play your test, and if you assume that there's going to be a lot of changes to your code base, you play the test, and then it's going to highlight the problem right here and allow me to change it on the fly. So now I could go in here and just change it and continue executing the test. So this is very, very powerful. There is also a different way of doing this with our tool. If you know that there's a major change being pushed and you want to make sure that all assertions are being updated based on the reference of the site, you can go into the test and then hit this magic wand here called the update wizard. And this is going to execute the test. And then if you choose update all validations based on page responses, it's automatically going to update all your validations. So let's play this once, and you'll see it's still going to fail and report a failure as usual, but it's going to update the test case to correspond to the new value. So if I go in here now, if I look into the code, as you can see, it's been reverted back. So now if I play it again, in the normal mode, it's basically gonna pass. So this is very fast, a very fast way when you have big code updates to update all your assertions to a new reference. Before we leave the recording and go over to some more complicated and sophisticated things, just want to show some normal tests that we want to do. Let's for instance say we want to test these filters here on the side. Well, this is fairly straightforward. Just create a new test, call it the filter test, and then start recording. So let's say here I want to just basically hit the filter and create an assertion on every first item here. So basically I'll continue and then I'll unclick the filter, click the next filter, create an assertion, click the next filter, create an assertion. And what we're basically doing, and let's say there is some back-end functionality that does a lot of different things here, you know. There could be a lot of stuff involved on a much more complicated site. Could be good to make sure that this functionality is working. So just basically click in the filter, create the assertions, and just in a minute we've created a pretty sophisticated test here. It's basically saying there should be no products of that type. And let's just play this back and see what happens. As you can see, really rapidly, we created a very simple filter test. You can also type into boxes there, as you see the branding. We could have done that as well. But as you can see, all that passed. So as you can see, it's really quick to create some really sophisticated tests using this toolbar. So remember, again, when you've done this, go ahead and save it to the server so the changes aren't lost, and also so they're available for your teammates, perhaps working on the same project. What if you just want to point out a bug? Let's say it's a visual bug, an image that is wrong, that is of course a little difficult to do with an assertion condition. Our tool cannot see into images just yet. Well, press on the plus, let's create visual bug with jacket, or whatever the different things are on this store. And let's go ahead and start recording. So let's say you're out browsing, going into, let's say you go in here and you go back into all categories, and then you go into this jacket here and you see that there is something wrong. Let's say this shouldn't be the machine blue jacket, right? So let's go ahead and just press the comment and just highlight whatever the problem is. And it gives you a suggested error messages. That is just that the error found. But here, of course, you can type in whatever, saying jacket shouldn't have that image, for instance, right? And now, basically, anyone can go in here. Let's say you save this. Now this is accessible to anyone in your project. So this could, for instance, be a tester assigning something to a developer saying, hey, take a look at this, or perhaps someone managing the content management system. So now it's very easy. If you play this back, it's basically just gonna take you through the same customer journey and then highlight the problem directly in the browser. And this is really useful. Of course, to highlight bugs and visual things and get fixes really fast. We just shown how easy it is to create a visual bug and to highlight it for someone in your team, for instance a developer. One thing though that could be worth noting is that we also have automatic reporting for this bug inside. So let's remember how we create a function test for the bug. This wasn't entirely correct. If you go in here under the General tab, this should actually be a bug. So as you can see, if I change this, the icon changes to a bug. So that makes it very easy when I go into a module to see what's bugs and what's basically function and regression tests. And as you can see now, if I save this, as you can see now I can actually, it's on the server, so I can actually report this automatically. So click into bug report, and then you can basically just assign it here directly to someone in your team, And as soon as you submit this, this will be sent as an email to someone in your team, and it will basically tell them exactly which test and action it is, and it will give you this kind of description here, which is now being used from my comment, but of course you can put anything in here. So this makes it very easy to report bugs in your team, and also of course to have solutions. And the really good thing is, because you have them in the tool, it's very easy to make sure that they don't reappear. They're all there, so you know, even if they're fixed, don't delete them. Now that we've gone over the main functionality, which is recording and validations, which you can do a lot of things with just with these two functions, we're going to see how we can tie together more complex scenarios. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to have tests calling other tests based on certain conditions. But let's start with something simple. So let's go back into the root, click on the plus, and it will create a new module. And let's create the shopping cart module. To actually have the shopping cart adding to the shopping cart, there's a lot of tests that are usually needed. It could be discounts, it could be different things. We will do very simple stuff to just illustrate a point, but it's still very useful. So bear with me here. So let's start with add item to cart. So let's make this small. Let's go in here and create a function test again. Actually, soon we're going to start creating these cell tests that are basically used for components for other tests. But let's keep it a function test for now. So here I'm going to start by saying add item to cart and submit this and simply record adding an item to the cart. So let's do record, and let's take any of these. Either we could click and add it to cart or just add it straight here, doesn't matter. So let's try and add one to the cart. And then we can say, hey, let's go into the cart and then validate the cart contents. But of course we can do that right here. We have the price. So let's go in anyways and then say, well, let's create a validation on that cart contents. But let's say we make kind of a mistake and we do on the total amount instead. So I'm clicking the total amount now, and I stop it, I close this, and let's try and run it. Let's see what happens. Well, as you can see, it actually failed. And let's see why. Well, if we go in here, let's go ahead and save it. And if we go into, you see that the validation failed because it basically maintains what we had in the cart. So what we can see here is that if we do want to validate on the total amount, we should have a cleanup condition. And that's what we're going to do in the next class. We're going to learn to build and apply cleanup conditions in terms of tests. So as we saw before, we had a problem with the cleanup condition. So what we're going to make sure now is that the cart is empty before we start the test. So the first thing you want to do is go into the shopping cart and create a new test. And this time you want to create a cell tests. And this is going to be called clean cart. And the reason why it's called an atomic test or cell test is that it automatically follows the current page. So it just means that whatever is open in the browser here, it acts from that point. It doesn't reload the URL. So think about it as always, it's better if it has like a parent test that drives it, that says where it starts, and then it's just basically a component to be run, a little function, okay? So let's just record this test, this clear cart test. Well, it's very simple. Just press record, go into the shopping cart, clear the cart, and close the cart window. Well, now, of course, if I add something to the cart, I can very simply go in and just play this test, and it's going to clear the cart for us. Well, that's not all. So that's really useful here. Let's make sure and save this. But what we can do now to get the other add item to cart to be successful is that you click in the top here and you'll add a plug test case. The plug allows us to plug in other test cases such as cleanup conditions and to build really cool logic. So let's just go into and click shopping cart, and let's run. Let's see here. Made a mistake. So let's go into reference and click shopping cart and clean cart. Okay, so that's going to be called now in the beginning of the test. Let's save this and let's see what happens. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a bunch of stuff to the cart that would typically make this test fail, and then we will play it and see what happens. As you can see, it starts by cleaning the cart and then adding and making the assertions on the cart, and the test is successful. Now that we've added a cleanup condition, all is fine, right? This test will always pass until the amount is different, and of course where the test should fail. But there's actually a better way of doing this. Well, now we're actually running the clear cart all the time, but this could be a time-consuming and unnecessary operation. What if in 99% of the time there's no need to run this operation, or shouldn't be run? Well, we can also drive this condition with an assertion. So I'll show you right here. So what we'll do is we'll basically start with a clean cart here, and I'll clear the cart, and then instead of as you can see here, you see we have the reference. I'll basically just remove this, and instead I can create an assertion to drive this. So what I'll do now is I'll create the assertion here on the cart, not there. Try it again. So what I'll do is I'll create the assertion on the cart instead. And that basically says validate that it's empty. So then of course what I can do here is, if I put it in the right order right there, is I can say, well, if the cart is empty, click on the advanced tab, then everything is fine, no need to do anything. But if the assertion fails, well, go ahead and clear the cart. So here I can do go to test case, and I can put shopping cart, clear cart. And then I don't want to consider this a real failure. I just want to create a warning and then continue the execution. So I don't want to stop executing the test case. And now what you can see, if we save this, this means that if the cart is empty, it doesn't do anything and it runs the test case. And if it has something in it, it'll clear the cart. So let me illustrate. So if I play this now, it's going to go ahead and check the validation if the cart is there, and then it's just basically going to go ahead and not clear the cart. But here, if I play it again when the cart is not empty, it's going to go ahead and run the clear the cart cleanup condition. And this is actually something that really sets this tool apart. It allows you to create logic trees very, very fast, and you can drive very, very complex functionality this way. Now that we've learned to do recordings and validation directly in the browser, and also to tie test cases together with logic, we are ready to take the next step, and that's basically doing a full checkout of things. So what we will also touch on here is how to bind data into forms. So what we will start by doing is again create a new module. So as you see, I'm there creating a test because I'm there. So I have to go back to the root, press the plus, and it will create a module. Here I will create checkout as a module, submit this, and create our first test. And what we'll do is, of course we could here basically create a full test that would add things to the cart, go into the shopping cart, check out. But what we want to do is we want to try and keep this kind of like atomic unit. So we create an atomic test called do checkout. And then it goes back to the minimize. We can easily just record this scenario. So we'll click on record, we press on the cart, we click on proceed to checkout, and then we can simply go in here and type away the information. So let's do this. So when you type here, just make sure that if you don't get an action being registered, just make sure to do an enter key. So you make sure that the recorder catches all of this. So here, as you can see, well, this is my address. We have, if you want to come over, we do great barbecues. We would go on here and do make payment. But let's not do that now. It's pretty expensive, $2,800. So let's wait with that. So I'll pause this. And now I can, of course, go back here and just try this flow. But I could also have an upstream test that triggers this. But let's just try now and play this back and see what happens. Well, as you can see, it seems to be working fine, filling out the whole form here for us. We showed you before how you can do a checkout easily, filling out the form using the record. Well, there's actually even a better way. So go ahead now, press the plus, create a new cell test, but this time let's do checkout with the data bind. So what this allows you to do is actually to do checkouts, but have the data being set as variables in our tool, being saved in the cloud. So let's try this again, very much the same idea. Press record, just click on the cart, click on proceed to checkout. But when you hit the checkout form, stop the recording and do this pick value from form and try and highlight and click in the form. And this is of course a little advanced, but as you can see, the form is highlighted and you see how it captures all the different values of the form. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to type in the same information as I did before in these fields. And that will generate exactly like before the recording with the trigger events that fills out the form. But there's one important difference, and it's that it allows us to get access to the data bind. So what you want to do is you want to click this checkbox, build data bind, and you want to bind it to the project level data. You can bind data on project, module, and test level, depending on where the data will be used. But I'm going to say that my payment information should be global to the whole project. And I'm going to put user info here. So now, when I click this thing here, if I play this back, let's go back so we're not cheating here. If I play this back now, it's going to do exactly the same as before, filling out the different fields, but it's going to basically save it in our tool as JSON data. And this is very powerful because it allows you to manipulate the data into forms dynamically and also to create loops over sets of data. So if you go in here now and you click on the project root here, then you can see that the data here is in the form of JSON in the tool. And this is very, very useful, and it also allows us to manipulate data in forms without doing multiple different recordings. So go ahead and save this. We've just created a checkout flow with data bind, where the data, your user info, is handled separately. Well, that's your credit card information, and you as a tester logging into the tool, perhaps you want to use that uniquely for you. But now we saved it on the project level, so it means everyone is using it. Well, we put something in there to allow you to override it. And basically, as you can see here, it ended up on default data. So if you want, you can basically go in here and copy the whole data set here. Copy the whole set of data. And then click into personal data and create the same key here called user info. And then I can go in here and copy that exact Oh, you got to make sure it's a JSON. So let's delete that. Make sure that the data is a JSON. Create the user info and then double click. And as you can see here, the same data, I just copied it over. But let's put not Mats Ljunggren, let's put Mats Wilander. That's my name. And I could change all the information, of course. And let's go ahead and save this. And then let's play back the same test case and see what happens. Well, basically now we've overridden the personal data, and of course you could remove it, the global data altogether on the default data. But as you can see, it's Mats Wilander here. And this is very useful when you are different testers in the team that has different login information, and you're basically recording the login. So that's the most common use case for this functionality. Now when we've created the checkout cell tests, we're ready to tie this all together. So let's do a full checkout flow, and let's introduce a new test type, the integration test. It's not always obvious when to use a function test and when to use an integration test, so it's a little up to you. But what you want to start by doing is click on the plus. Okay, just make sure that the running task is complete, and go ahead, you can click on this plus instead and click on the composite test or integration test, and go ahead and say end-to-end, let's do end-to-end checkout flow, and let's tie together the clear cart, the add to cart, and all the stuff that we did before, so we have a full test case. So what I'll do now, instead of working in here with recordings and stuff, I'll go ahead and just here, just do some error there. What I'll do is I'll go in here and I'll go ahead and just plug in the other test cases. So the first thing you want to plug in is the navigation, no, the shopping cart. Let's see, add item to cart that has the cleanup condition. And with that, we want to create another plug into the checkout with data bind, which were our latest best test case. So here, when I do that, I basically created, just in a matter of seconds, a composite test that takes care of all these things. So what we expected to do is to start by cleaning the cart, then doing the assertion, adding to the cart, doing the assertion, and doing the checkout. So let's see if that works. Well, first it should do the assertion, making sure that the cart is empty. And of course, when we do things like this, we could of course tie in much more logic, saying that, okay, at the end of the test case, for instance, if the cart is not empty, make sure to clean it, etc., etc. But as you can see, it fills in now the data from the data bind. And this is a very, very good starting point now to create really sophisticated logic trees and to be able to do a lot of interesting testing, making sure your code hasn't broken, that everything is working as expected without you needing to click through the user interface.